Tucked away in Wisconsin lies West Allis. Its identity was forged in 1902 when Allis-Chalmers constructed a colossal industrial hub just outside of Milwaukee. This region was originally known as North Greenfield. However, the plant's scale and influence were so massive that residents rebranded the community after the Allis-Chalmers Corporation. Its workforce eventually peaked at 17,000 individuals, churning out those iconic orange tractors and massive turbines that would eventually provide the electrical backbone for the Hoover Dam, while even refining uranium for the secret Manhattan Project during the Second World War. The site spanned 160 acres with 4 million square feet of floor space, featuring 21 miles of internal rail lines and a massive foundry that processed 80,000 tons of iron into individual castings weighing 135 tons. Then came December 6, 1985, when the final unit in Allis-Chalmers 6070 exited the bay at 10:26 in the morning. A crowd of 100 employees snapped photos of the end. A facility that once supported 17,000 people was down to the bare minimum. 2 years later, the enterprise declared bankruptcy. Within 12 years, the headquarters shut for good. The era of the orange tractor had officially ended. Wrecking balls leveled the plant. Every paycheck vanished. This is the chronicle of how West Allis lost its namesake in 17,000 positions that never returned. Chapter 1. Building a Dynasty. Our tale begins in 1861. Edward Phelps Allis, a prominent figure in the Milwaukee leather industry, acquired the failing Reliance Works foundry during a public auction and transformed it into Edward P. Allis and Company. The move proved incredibly providential. The United States was in the midst of an industrial boom. Plants required engines. Grain mills needed hardware. Expanding cities demanded new infrastructure. Allis kicked things off with 75 staffers. Before long, he was managing a crew of over 1,500. By 1867, the operation had relocated to an expansive facility in Walker's Point. In 1869, he took over his primary rival, Biate Iron, which allowed him to start selling portable mills, steam boilers, and specialized gear systems. Throughout the late 19th century, Edward P. Allis and Company rose to become a manufacturing titan. Following the passing of Edward P. Allis in 1889, the brand was globally recognized as the premier supplier of equipment for sawmills and flour production. Alongside world-class steam engines, their technology even energized the earliest electric subways in New York in the 1893 World's Fair. The massive shift occurred in 1901 when 4 industrial giants combined to form the Allis-Chalmers Corporation, including the Edward P. Allis Company and Chicago's own Fraser and Chalmers, plus Gates Iron Works and Dixon Manufacturing. This new powerhouse possessed unmatched skills in steam power, heavy mining construction, and specialized industrial motors. In 1900, 2 Allis-Chalmers broke ground on a gargantuan factory located in the North Greenfield area just west of Milwaukee. Starting with 110 acres, the campus rapidly expanded to encompass over 160 acres of land. This is where the narrative takes a unique turn. The industrial site was so enormous that the local government actually changed the town's name. North Greenfield was formally rechristened West Allis in 1902, forever linking the city to the factory's legacy. During the early 20th century, Allis-Chalmers supplied the heavy machinery that fueled the rapid growth of the American frontier. They produced giant turbines for utility plants, massive rock crushers for mines, and high-output engines for factories across the entire country. However, the year 1912 marked a turning point. The business was restructured as the Allis-Chalmers Manufacturing Company, with a retired general named Otto Falk stepping in to implement a radical new strategy. Falk recognized that the future of the nation lay in the soil. American agriculture was transitioning away from animal labor toward gasoline-powered machinery. Huge numbers of farmers were looking to purchase their first mechanical tractors, swapping out horse teams for equipment that could till land much faster and more efficiently. Falk intended for Allis-Chalmers to lead this market. In 1914, the firm debuted its initial farming models, the 1018, the 612, and the 1530. These were far from perfect tools. They were bulky, overpriced, and prone to breaking down. Initially, the tractor branch was a massive financial drain. Many high-level managers were certain that Falk had made a catastrophic executive blunder. Yet Falk remained steadfast that farming was the path forward, betting the entire firm's solvency on it. Over the following decade, Allis-Chalmers improved its designs. Despite these efforts, the department continued to lose substantial amounts of capital. By the middle of the 1920s, there was heavy internal lobbying to scrap the project. Falk stood firm, hiring a specialist in 1926 to save the brand. That new hire was a man named Harry Merritt, and he was about to flip the script. Chapter 2. The Orange Revolution. Interestingly, Harry Merritt wasn't actually an engineer. He was a promotional mastermind. When Otto Falk brought him on in 1926, observers assumed his role was to dismantle the failing tractor wing. Merritt saw a different path. Having spent years in agricultural sales, he grasped the needs of the American farmer far better than any technician. In 1928, Allis-Chalmers bought out the Monarch Tractor Company in Illinois, adding specialized crawler units to their growing catalog of machinery. Around 1929, the firm snagged LaCrosse Plow Works, which manufactured the top-tier plows and gear that farmers truly desired. However, the choice that would define Allis-Chalmers for the rest of time occurred in 1929 while traveling for business in California. Harry Merritt caught a glimpse of vibrant orange poppies while cruising past some fields and a light bulb went off. Those flowers popped so much you could see them from miles away. Since folks were working massive plots of land, they had to be able to find their rigs across hundreds of acres. No other shade could beat orange for visibility against green stalks and muddy soil. Merritt didn't hesitate and called for a total overhaul right then. From that point on, every Allis-Chalmers machine was coated in Persian Orange, which was the nearest match they had to those California wildflowers. It might sound like a minor detail, as a fresh coat of paint won't fix an engine, but Merritt grasped marketing concepts his rivals completely missed. That neon orange Allis-Chalmers look quickly turned into one of the most iconic sights across the American heartland. His timing was spot on. Throughout the 1930s, the competition watched Allis-Chalmers blow up and scrambled to rip off their playbook. International Harvester went for a solid red theme in 1936. Minneapolis-Moline picked Prairie Gold toward the end of the 1930s. John Deere stayed true to green, yet orange belonged solely to Allis-Chalmers. If a guy saw an orange speck a quarter-mile out, he knew precisely what it was. Those orange rigs built a level of brand devotion that went way beyond a simple sale. Anyone who picked up their first Allis-Chalmers in the 1930s usually stuck with the brand for the rest of their born days. This love for the orange iron was passed down from fathers to their boys. The fans were so die-hard they'd claim that once you tried orange, you'd never switch, and they weren't joking. Even though the Great Depression was wrecking the national economy, during the 1930s, the tractor side of Allis-Chalmers just kept expanding. They rolled out several fresh units, including the 1830, the 1220, and the 1525, along with the United Tractor, the predecessor to the legendary Model U. These machines definitely weren't the budget options. Their price tags were usually higher than what Deere or International Harvester offered. But if you took care of an Allis-Chalmers, that thing would run for decades. Coming into the late 1930s, Harry Merritt pulled off a total miracle compared to where things stood back in 1926. A department that had been bleeding cash for 10 years was finally in the black and thriving. Even better, the money made from tractors was basically carrying the rest of Allis-Chalmers on its back. An outfit that started with steam power and heavy industrial gear was now staying afloat thanks to those orange farm machines. Once World War II kicked off, Allis-Chalmers showed the world they could handle a lot more than just farm equipment. They started cranking out munitions, turbines, and even helped with the atomic bomb project. That West Allis plant was set to become a vital gear in the nation's military engine. Part 3. The Engine of War. Global conflict turned Allis-Chalmers into a cornerstone of the American military push. The facility over in West Allis, which had 9,681 staff in 1937, ballooned to over 20,000 during the fighting. They ran 3 shifts around the clock, 7 days a week. The team produced maritime and flight engines, destroyer weaponry, subcontrols, and tanks for the boys on the ground. The sheer range of products was wild, and every bit of it needed the pinpoint accuracy Allis-Chalmers had spent years mastering. Some of their most notable work actually happened before the first shots were fired. Late in the 1930s, the PWA commissioned 7 giant hydraulic turbines from Allis-Chalmers for the Hoover Dam build. We aren't talking about your run-of-the-mill hardware here. Every single unit was massive, demanding the kind of high-level casting and design work only a tiny group of firms on Earth could pull off. As Hoover Dam began cranking out power for LA and the rest of Southern California, It was Allis-Chalmers technology humming away inside that giant concrete structure. Still, the most hush-hush project went down in a shop that was off-limits to almost everyone. During the war, Allis-Chalmers signed on to build uranium refining gear for the Manhattan Project, that super classified initiative to build the first atomic weapon. Things were so quiet that the laborers had no clue what they were actually making. They just understood it was high stakes and under heavy watch. MPS were posted outside those specific sections of the plant 24 hours a day. Once a shift wrapped up, they'd even sweep up and lock away the tiny metal scraps left on the floor. The crew couldn't say a peep about their tasks. No wives, no buddies, nobody. It was a total information blackout. Only after the bombs dropped on Japan did the Allis-Chalmers folks realize they'd been building the very gear used to refine that uranium. The lockdown was so tight that once the fighting stopped, once it came time to renovate the Manhattan Project facility, crews gutted the interior and pumped concrete into the basement. They essentially paved over the history. One atomic testing facility remains on site, though it's been masked and sealed off to hide its past operations. Allis-Chalmers prioritized military secrets that highly. With the guys heading to the front lines, ladies stepped up to run the factory floors. These workers handled welding torches and inspection rolls strictly restricted to men prior to the attack on December 7th. The West Allis plant grew into a mini metropolis, employing 20,000 staff members on rotating schedules to ensure the machines never stopped. Kitchens fed thousands while on-site clinics managed any medical issues. The site even operated its own fire crew. By 1945, Allis-Chalmers stood as a premier powerhouse in the nation's manufacturing sector. Staffing dipped from 20,000 during the conflict down to roughly 15,000. It remained a giant nonetheless. Management had demonstrated their ability to manufacture whatever the country required, ranging from citrus-colored machinery to nuclear hardware. Once peace arrived, orders for agricultural and heavy gear went through the roof. The 50s and 60s represented the ultimate peak for Allis-Chalmers. Harry Merritt's signature orange machines were destined for legendary status in the heartland. Tech developed at the West Allis was poised to revolutionize global food production. However, this prosperity sparked complications that would ultimately trigger the firm's downfall. Part 4, the heyday. A 1950s strategic choice would power Allis-Chalmers for several decades. During 1955, they purchased Gleaner Manufacturing, a top-tier harvester producer out of Independence, Missouri. That purchase was a masterstroke. Allis-Chalmers led the market in towed harvesters, yet it was obvious that autonomous self-driven models were the path forward. Gleaner provided Allis-Chalmers with an immediate edge across the board. Post-buyout harvester sales were so massive, they accounted for the lion's share of corporate earnings. Harvester sales were effectively bankrolling the entire corporation. It became typical to see metallic Gleaner units pairing with bright orange Allis-Chalmers machines across the rural landscape. Agricultural workers relied on both names, and that confidence spiked their revenue. A major shift arrived in 1957 with the D-Series debut. This lineup represented their total engineering expertise packed into contemporary frames. The D14 launched, first offering perks that growers immediately loved. Next up was the D17, intended to succeed the WD45 and engineered for heavy foreplow tasks. During a decade-long run, Allis-Chalmers manufactured 62,867 units of the D17, validating the excellence of the build. Still, the D19 was the machine that truly altered the landscape. Debuting in 1961, the D19 broke new ground. It stood as the industry's premier ag machine, featuring an integrated turbocharger from the shop floor. This wasn't a bolt-on kit or a pricey add-on. It was a core component baked directly into the original assembly. In 1961, turbocharging remained a fresh and costly innovation. Other brands stayed away since buyers wouldn't swallow the premium. However, the designers at Allis-Chalmers recognized the upside. Turbos allowed for increased power and better mileage without the need for a bulky, oversized block. The D19 diesel put out roughly 77 horses, rivaling the output of much more massive power plants. Once the D19 underwent Nebraska evaluation in April of 1962, the theory was validated. That specific diesel variant produced great torque, while showing off fuel savings that standard motors simply couldn't touch. D19 owners found they could haul heavier loads and operate for extended stretches, while using less diesel than rival models. That Pioneer turbo unit was a legit breakthrough, not some sales gimmick. Allis-Chalmers built on that success with the 190 and its XT version taking on the iconic John Deere 4020. Launched in 1964, the 190 XT utilized the same tech to pump out 93 horsepower at the hitch. Allis-Chalmers was no longer just chasing the heels of John Deere or International Harvester. They were meeting them blow for blow on every technical front. The 190 XT earned a reputation for something else, though. Users figured out that tweaking the fuel pump could crank these machines way past their official specs. A standard 190 XT produced 93 horses, but a simple adjustment could boost that to 120 or higher. This often blew out of the drivetrains. The D19 guts couldn't handle the strain, yet it showcased the massive headroom of the turbo platform. Eventually, the D21 arrived, debuting in 1963 as the premier D-Series model. This was the very first Allis-Chalmers to break the 100-horsepower barrier. It boasted a massive 7.0-liter engine. Delivering 103 horsepower, the D21 became the largest row crop machine available on the market. Once Allis-Chalmers added a turbocharger in 1965, the D21's output surged to roughly 128 horsepower, transforming it into the most muscular and expensive tractor Allis-Chalmers ever produced at nearly $10,000. Across the heartland, those orange machines were a staple sight. Everyone from small-scale family growers to massive industrial farms put their trust in Allis-Chalmers gear. The company enjoyed a level of brand devotion that went far beyond typical business. Farmers often spoke about their orange tractors with genuine heart. To them, these weren't mere tools. They represented a vital piece of their family heritage. Grandfathers would hand down Allis-Chalmers iron to their grandsons, and those same machines were still running hard 30 or 40 years later. Over at the West Allis plant, the production floor was buzzing with 15,000 employees, building tractors and heavy machinery for a global audience. The entire factory footprint was almost impossibly large, covering 160 acres, including over 4 million square feet of workspace, 21 miles of internal rail lines, and 5 miles of roads for moving parts. Their foundry could process 80,000 tons of metal annually, casting individual components weighing up to 135 tons. It stood as a premier manufacturing hub. Yet beneath all that outward prosperity, deep-seated issues were brewing that the leadership either overlooked or simply ignored. Allis-Chalmers consistently occupied the third or fourth spot in every industry they entered. John Deere and International Harvester owned the farm market, while Caterpillar and Case ran the show in construction. In the heavy electrical sector, Westinghouse and General Electric were the undisputed kings. Allis-Chalmers never managed to snag the top spot. Being stuck in third or fourth meant surviving on much thinner margins than the industry leaders. When the economy was booming, Allis-Chalmers stayed afloat, but the firm lacked any real financial safety net. They were far more susceptible to market crashes than the bigger players. Come 1960, desperation pushed Allis-Chalmers toward a choice that would haunt them for decades. The glory days were legitimate, and their tech was top tier. Even though those orange machines were iconic, the company's footing was far more fragile than anyone dared to say. And a major scandal was about to reveal just how bad things had gotten. Chapter 5. The Scandal and the Fallout. In 1960, the feds uncovered a secret plot that sent shockwaves through the heavy electric industry. 13 different firms, including the big three Westinghouse, General Electric, and Allis-Chalmers, had teamed up behind closed doors to fix prices and rig contract bids. This illegal cooperation had lasted years and involved products worth millions of dollars. When federal investigators confronted the companies with the facts, most of them played dumb. They denied any wrongdoing, acted oblivious, and threw low-level staff under the bus. Allis-Chalmers took a different path. The firm entered a guilty plea, with leadership confessing to the price-fixing ring. That admission absolutely tanked the brand's image and trustworthiness. However, people who study business history later argued that this wasn't driven by corporate greed. It was pure survival mode. The heavy electric sector was a dogfight with three massive companies scrapping over every single deal. Allis-Chalmers was the smallest fish in that pond and was actually bleeding money in that particular sector. Rigging the prices was a reckless, illegal gamble to stop the losses. It backfired completely and permanently stained the Allis-Chalmers name. Throughout the 1960s, Allis-Chalmers struggled to pivot. The firm rebranded as the Allis-Chalmers Corporation in 1971 to manage global wings, but the heat from competitors only intensified everywhere. Overseas brands like Kubota started hitting the States with more affordable tractors. Meanwhile, firms from Japan and Europe were undercutting domestic prices on heavy construction machinery. By 1974, Allis-Chalmers teamed up with Fiat to create Fiat Allis, hoping to stay relevant in the construction world. Fiat took a 65% controlling interest, leaving Allis-Chalmers as a junior partner in their own division. Just think about that for a second. The company simply couldn't hack it in the construction market alone. They had to lean on an Italian partner just to survive. That partnership was a clear signal of their decline. Their tractor wing felt the same heat. In 1977, in an attempt to keep up with the flood of small diesel tractors coming in from Japan, Allis-Chalmers started shipping in Hinomoto tractors powered by Toyota engines. They slapped Allis-Chalmers decals on these Japanese imports and tried to sell them as homegrown products. But the farming community saw right through it. They knew these weren't crafted in West Allis by local hands. They were just foreign machines wearing a coat of orange paint. For a brand that built its whole identity on American quality and grit, selling imports felt like a slap in the face to their most loyal fans. For half a century, farmers put their faith in those orange machines, but now some were rolling out of foreign factories instead. That deep-seated dignity Allis-Chalmers maintained through the Great Depression and global conflicts was fading as imported inventory took over. By 1978, Allis-Chalmers entered another partnership, teaming up with Siemens to form Siemens Allis for electrical control gear. This latest deal was just another sign that Allis-Chalmers could no longer survive as a solo player in the market. A once mighty pillar of American industry was forced to lean on international partners across its various sectors just to keep its head above water. As the 1970s drew to a close, Allis-Chalmers found itself failing on every front, with vanishing profits and a mountain of debt that kept growing higher. Global rivals were aggressive, undercutting them at every turn, yet thousands still worked at West Allis as orange tractors continued to be built. There was still a glimmer of optimism as long as those machines kept leaving the plant. Then the 1980s hit, bringing a massive agricultural downturn that shattered everything Allis-Chalmers built over 80 years with shocking speed. Chapter 6. The farming industry bottoms out. The start of the 1980s saw a perfect storm that completely gutted the American heartland. Sky-high interest rates turned standard agricultural financing into a crushing weight for most growers. An overpriced dollar killed export potential while property prices plummeted, forcing thousands of multi-generational farms into total insolvency. With the farming community broke, tractor sales vanished, dealing a terminal blow to the future of Allis-Chalmers. The firm had always been in a tight spot, spread thin across many industries, without ever truly leading in any single one. Once the market for agricultural gear tanked, Allis-Chalmers lost its primary cash cow, and those legendary orange tractors stopped moving. Showrooms were packed with equipment nobody could afford, and new requests for machinery simply ceased to exist. The financial hit was brutal and getting worse every single year. In 1981, Allis-Chalmers saw a loss of $28.8 million. While that was a heavy blow, it seemed survivable, but 1982 was a disaster, with losses reaching $27 million. Then 1983 saw losses balloon to $261 million, showing the crisis was only picking up steam. The organization was fading away, so in a frantic attempt to find cash, Allis-Chalmers began offloading its assets to stop the bleed. During 1983, the firm sold off Simplicity, its branch for yard and garden tools, to the people running that specific division. That cash injection provided a brief moment of relief, but the main business was still hemorrhaging millions of dollars every few months. 1985 eventually arrived, marking the final year of the company as it once existed. Come May 1985, Allis-Chalmers handed over its entire farming department to Klockner Humboldt Deutz, the West German firm known as Deutz. That agreement turned over the rights to build their tractors in the highly successful Gleaner combine line to the new owners. Deutz took control of the products, the trademark name, and the entire network of regional sellers, but they walked away from the plant. Here is the catch: they skipped the West Allis site. Deutz wanted the brand rights, but they had zero interest in the aging Wisconsin facility or the veteran American staff who had built those machines for generations. The strategy for Deutz was to shift all manufacturing to their German plants and then ship the finished products back to the States. However, the buyers did make one small concession. Allis-Chalmers was permitted to keep producing three specific tractor lines, the 6000, 8000, and 4W305 at West Allis until late 1985. Corporate analysts later dismissed this move as nothing more than a marketing ploy to appease longtime brand loyalists. It offered dedicated Allis-Chalmers fans one last shot at owning a true American-made machine before the work moved overseas for good. Also during 1985, the Fiat-Allis partnership for heavy machinery dissolved when Fiat bought the remaining minority portion from Allis-Chalmers, having seen enough failure. They were tired of being tied to a sinking American ship that was dragging their own operations down. Throughout that year, Allis-Chalmers liquidated everything else to settle its debts, while the staff at West Allis faced a grim reality. A workforce that once topped 17,000 people had dwindled to just a few hundred by the end of 1985. Huge industrial halls went dark and sat vacant as the assembly lines that powered the local economy finally fell silent. Those 21 miles of internal tracks saw less traffic every day as the flow of raw materials eventually stopped altogether. The writing was on the wall, and employees who spent decades there had to watch the company die a slow, painful death. What was once a bustling industrial city with its own clinics and fire crews was rapidly turning into a silent wasteland. The massive workshops that once built the turbines for the Hoover Dam and hardware for the Manhattan Project stood hollow, serving as quiet gravestones for a passing era of American manufacturing. December 1985 was closing in. That deal with Deutz signaled the end of tractor manufacturing by New Year's Eve. The crew knew the exact moment the final unit would wrap. They realized they were witnessing the death of a legend. At 10:26 in the morning on December 6, 1985, the very last Allis-Chalmers tractor made in West Allis exited the plant for good. 84 years of making farm equipment was reaching its finish line. Those signature orange machines that powered American farms for decades were going extinct, leaving the builders discarded just like old scrap metal. Chapter 7. The final tractor was a Model 6070, serial number 1972, the ultimate Allis-Chalmers machine from the West Allis shop. Roughly 100 employees huddled around it inside that massive echoing facility. They were the survivors of the thousands who once filled those halls. Those 2-block-long lines that pumped out countless orange tractors for 80 years had finally fallen silent. Only this last tractor remained. Someone brought out a cake. People shared slices, trying to force a smile through a moment that felt more like a funeral than a party. Others snapped photos, desperate to preserve a memory of this history even as the sight broke their hearts. Longtime work buddies shook hands and gave each other hugs after decades of laboring together. Tears started flowing for some. That nod to the old cartoon sign-off felt brutally and hauntingly accurate right then. This wasn't merely a production halt. It was the collapse of their entire world. It wiped out careers that spanned 30 or 40 years. It killed the notion that loyalty and hard work meant a damn thing. The dream of raising a family by building American tractors was officially dead. The crew's bitterness was genuine and totally earned. Back in July 1985, 5 months prior, Allis-Chalmers had basically killed the pension fund. Folks promised a secure retirement after a lifetime of service were told the coffers were dry. The business was broke. Pensions vanished. No severance, no health insurance extensions. After giving their best years to the shop workers were just thrown away. For those in their 50s and 60s, this was devastating. They were too old for a fresh start, but too young for Social Security, stuck in a terrifying financial limbo. A 58-year-old veteran with 36 years at Allis-Chalmers asked a reporter, "I'm thankful for the time, but what's my next move?" Who's hiring a 58-year-old? He had real talent and value. He possessed decades of expertise in high-end machinery, but those specific skills died with the tractor lines. What choice did he have? Start over in a new field at 58, take some entry-level gig for pennies on the dollar, uproot his family and move states away, hunting for factory work that probably didn't exist anyway. Another guy didn't hold back his rage. "They axed our pensions in July, and now we're booted with zero severance or coverage. They couldn't care less about us." And he wasn't wrong. The firm was circling the drain. There was no cash for payouts. They barely had enough to cover the final checks. The very people who built Allis-Chalmers were being hung out to dry. When the workday ended, the crew walked out those gates for the final time. A few lingered at the exit, taking one last look at the walls that had seen most of their adult lives. A plant that once supported 17,000 people was down to just 100 souls on that closing day. Even those few would soon be gone as the remaining parts were sold or scrapped. 84 years of tractor history ended right there. Starting with those first prototypes in 1914, all the way to that 6070 model in 1985. Allis-Chalmers had produced nearly 100 different styles. Those bright orange rigs became symbols of the American dream. 3 generations of farmers had put their faith in the Allis-Chalmers name. But faith doesn't pay the bills when you're bankrupt and overseas rivals are undercutting your prices. The last tractor sat there with a taped-on sign. "That's all, folks." The end. The assembly line was officially dead. Yet Allis-Chalmers didn't vanish instantly. It lingered for 14 more years, liquidating assets and slowly fading through bankruptcy. The orange tractors were history, but the final act was still being written. Chapter 8. Bankruptcy and the Wrecking Ball. After that final tractor rolled out in December 1985, Allis-Chalmers struggled for 2 years selling pieces while trying to stay afloat. By June 29, 1987, the hammer finally fell. Allis-Chalmers Corporation filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. A company that survived the 19th century panics, the Civil War and both World Wars, plus the Great Depression, finally buckled under the 1980s recession and global pressure. The West Allis plant shut its doors forever on January 29, 1989. A small group of office workers stayed behind for a bit to wrap up the books and legalities, but the assembly lines had already gone cold. The very plant that once crafted the massive turbines for Hoover Dam, handled uranium for the Manhattan Project, and built those iconic orange tractors for the American heartland now sat hollow and quiet. Tearing the whole place down had actually started quite a few years before that. Back in 1985, even before the final tractor was finished, Allis-Chalmers leveled a portion of the West Allis site for a mall. The firm was desperate for the cash that land sale brought in. More wrecking balls arrived in 1986 and kept swinging through the 90s as a bankruptcy trust carved up the lots and flattened the shops. That reorganization trust was established by a New York bankruptcy court with the sole mission of selling off assets and leveling the old factories. Some of the structures were demolished almost immediately, while others were left standing not to save them, but simply because the trust ran out of cash before the demolition crew could finish. This halted destruction is the only reason some of those historic walls are still around today. They are relics of a budget shortfall rather than any actual attempt at historic preservation. On January 30th, 1999, the final Allis-Chalmers office in Milwaukee shuttered its doors for the last time. 152 years after the Reliance Works iron foundry launched in 1847, Allis-Chalmers was officially over. No production, no desks, no staff. The corporation that once reigned as the largest private employer in Wisconsin had vanished into history. These days, the land where 17,000 workers once built those orange tractors is known as Summit Place. It is a corporate park that houses about 2,500 employees, which is less than 15% of the peak Allis-Chalmers workforce. Most of the people there are young professionals in tech business and medicine. They spend their days in modern office suites, right where foundry fires once melted 80,000 tons of iron every single year. Most of these younger employees have zero clue they are working on the very ground where American industrial power was born and buried. It never crosses their minds that secret work for the atomic bomb happened right where they stand. They do not realize Hoover Dam's massive turbines were forged here or how those orange tractors changed the way America farmed. To them, West Allis is just another suburb of Milwaukee filled with business parks and retail centers. Other sections of the former Allis-Chalmers footprint were turned into shopping strips, paved parking lots, and classrooms for Milwaukee Area Technical College. Those 21 miles of rail and 5 miles of roads are gone. The giant foundry is history, and the assembly lines are dead. Almost every physical trace of what Allis-Chalmers used to be has been wiped away. Allis-Chalmers left an incredible mark on this community that is hard to put into words. They were the town's main breadwinner and truly the soul of the area. Not a week goes by without someone mentioning they or their kin used to work there. The older folks still remember. They recall a time when practically everyone's father or grandfather was on the Allis-Chalmers payroll. They can still hear the ghost of that factory whistle that used to tell the entire town exactly what time it was. But those stories are fading as that generation grows old and passes on. Soon, nobody will be left to remember what West Allis actually lost. The city will still carry the name West Allis, named for a corporation that no longer exists in the real world. And the new residents will have no idea why their town has that name or what it once stood for. Chapter 9. The Orange Legacy. The Allis-Chalmers name did not just vanish into thin air when the bankruptcy hit. In 1990, a management team bought out the Deutz Allis division to form AGCO Corporation. That name stood for Allis Gleaner Company, a direct nod to the two legendary brands Deutz had acquired back in 1985. AGCO was essentially the second coming of Allis-Chalmers. For nearly a decade, AGCO manufactured tractors under the AGCO Allis name, bringing back that famous Persian Orange paint that Harry Merritt picked out in 1929. Farmers who grew up with Allis-Chalmers could finally get their hands on a brand new orange machine again. It looked like the brand had survived the crash, but AGCO eventually retired the Allis-Chalmers name around the year 2001. The company figured the legacy branding was not worth the upkeep in a consolidating global marketplace. The orange tractor finally reached the end of the road for the second and last time. AGCO is still a major power in the farm equipment world today, but the Allis-Chalmers name and that orange glow are gone. The firm just folded the brand into its larger portfolio and moved forward, but the spirit lives on in the classic tractor world. Restored Allis-Chalmers tractors are major collector's items and sell for a pretty penny these days. A clean Model D19 with a factory turbocharger can easily go for $15,000 to $25,000. A mint 1960 XT in top shape can bring $30,000 to $40,000 or even more. These are way more than just museum pieces. 70 or 80 years later, you can still find plenty of refurbished Allis-Chalmers machines pulling their weight out in the fields. Come summertime, fans of the brand flock to the Orange Spectacular, a yearly bash honoring the company's legacy with hundreds of orange tractors on display. We are talking about everything from vintage 1920s units to the very last ones produced in 1985. Folks trade parts, swap restoration hacks, and recount tales of these rigs and the hard-working farmers who first put them to use. Plenty of owners actually got their machines as heirlooms from dads or grandfathers who picked them up brand new a lifetime ago. Others rescued beat-up Allis-Chalmers units from rotting in old barns or overgrown fence lines, dedicating years to bringing them back. They are all united by a passion for these tough, orange workhorses that just won't quit, despite the manufacturer folding over 25 years back. Digital hubs and Facebook communities link Allis-Chalmers fans across the globe, where people post snapshots of their gear, hash out mechanical hiccups, figure out how to fix things, and keep that deep-rooted expertise alive as the original factory crew starts to fade away. Whenever a forgotten, dusty treasure is uncovered, the whole group jumps in to help track its history, find the right gear, and get it running like new again. Museums nationwide showcase Allis-Chalmers hardware as icons of American industrial grit and breakthroughs in farming technology. Even the Smithsonian has some on display. You will spot those bright orange tractors front and center in agricultural exhibits all over the Midwest. These pieces of equipment represent an era where U.S. manufacturing ruled the globe and homegrown creativity transformed whole sectors. Back in West Allis, the older folks still hold on to those memories of when the plant provided jobs for their entire families. Everyone back then had a personal connection to someone earning a paycheck at Allis-Chalmers. The sound of the factory whistle used to echo through the streets, signaling the start and end of shifts that dictated the town's pace. Yet those days are slipping away as the old-school Allis-Chalmers workforce continues to age. While their kids might recall the anecdotes, the newest generation is starting to lose that connection. Pretty soon, the reality of West Allis being a powerhouse where 17,000 workers revolutionize farming will be a ghost of the past. The name Allis-Chalmers might stay on the signs, but the soul behind it will vanish. This is the Allis-Chalmers saga. 84 years of crafting iconic orange tractors ended when the 1980s farm slump and corporate blunders wiped it all out. So did your granddad ever spend his days behind the wheel of an Allis-Chalmers? Maybe you have one gathering dust in a shed just waiting for a second chance. Remember when West Allis meant 17,000 manufacturing careers? Drop a comment below and share your own history with us. If you like this deep look at a fallen American industrial titan, make sure to hit like and subscribe to our channel. We have plenty more stories about great American brands that built amazing things and employed thousands before simply vanishing. It is up to us to tell these tales before they are gone for good and the people who lived through it are no longer here.